All right, folks, welcome back from the commercial break. A long time ago, one of my earliest elections that I got to cover, 1992, Bill Clinton, there was a strategist named Jim Carville. He's still around. He's a wily Louisianan, but he had a very simple statement. It's the economy, stupid. And that obviously defined not only the 1992 election, but many elections both before and after. It seems like this election is shaping up to be something similar. People feel insecure economically, and they also feel a little bit insecure security-wise with the border, crime, and the world aflame. I thought I'd bring in somebody who gets both of these issues so well. He's from the great state of Georgia, and our good friend, Congressman Austin Scott. Congressman, good to have you on the show.
John, thanks for having me. And, Carville was right then, and he's right now. It is the economy, and if we keep our message on the economy, and don't allow the Democrats to distract from that, I think the Democrats are going to have a very hard time come November convincing the American citizens that they're better off today than they were when Donald Trump was the president and the economy was growing at a pace that exceeded inflation. And that's the key to it for the American citizens, is that the economy needs to be growing while inflation is in check.
Yep. Yeah, it's been the upside down the last 3.5 years, and people really notice it, but perhaps nowhere more than when they go to the grocery store. I was in the grocery store over the weekend just picking up some basics, and the guy in front of me was just so upset at the price of the bill. He's like, this was like half of this just a couple of years ago. What's going on? And the woman just looked at him, the cashier, and said, it's not me. It's something bigger than me. But I think that the grocery cart reminding people of that is an important message, right?
Absolutely, and the Democrat solution to that is to give people more SNAP benefits and or legislate price freezes, which is in and of itself a Marxist, communist, socialist plan on the price freezing. And so I don't understand why the Democrats keep doubling down. I guess because they're Democrats on the things they've done. But John, just look at the cost of energy in the country. And if you're running a grocery store, you think about all those refrigeration units that have to be running in that grocery store to keep the milk, cold and the eggs cool. And their cost of operations have gone up significantly in the grocery store. And that all of that is embedded in what we pay when we go in and we purchase something. And so the idea that you can freeze prices and increase cost on businesses, the only person who would come up with that is somebody that has absolutely zero private sector experience, and that would be Kamala Harris.
Yeah, boy, she took a beating even in the Washington Post, which is normally a reliable defender of the left, but even they were pretty brutal this weekend.
CNN called her out for it too. So it's a very dangerous policy. Competition's the best thing for the consumer, not price fixing.
Yeah, it works every time. And when you do price fixing, it's never worked in the history of the globe, let alone in the United States. It's a clear thing. I want to turn a little bit to the other insecurity that people feel, which is it feels like the world is so much more unstable than it was 4 years ago, whether it's the shipping routes in the Middle East or the Russia-Ukraine war, or even inside our own border with illegal aliens committing horrific crimes and just crime in general up. You have a unique vantage point between the House Intelligence Committee and other assignments you have. How unstable is the world compared to 4 years ago?
Very much so, and the world respects strength, and we don't have that in the White House right now. And I will tell you, I slept very good with Donald Trump in the White House. If you think back to his 4 years, there were no new wars that were created. The border was secure. Crime was under control inside the United States of America. I do not believe that Russia would have done what they did in Ukraine if Donald Trump had been the president of the United States. I mean, basically, it's like the terrorists and other people waited on Donald Trump to leave office and Joe Biden to go in for them to carry out their actions. And so, there's a lot of security that comes from having a strong president of the United States, and we had that under Donald Trump, and we can have it again in a few months. But if we don't get that, we've had 9.9 million encounters from illegal immigrants since the Biden administration took place. 350 of those are on the terrorist watch list. Now, the Biden-Harris administration and now the Harris-Walz administration, they have invited those people into this country. They made it clear when they took office that there was not going to be border enforcement. And the only time they made any efforts at all in the last couple of months is after their polls showed that it was going to be a problem for them in the election. And governing by polls is certainly not leadership. But 9.9 million encounters, they invited them here, and 31,000 of those are Chinese nationals. These are not our friends. They are a liability to this country when they come here illegally. And again, John, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Legal immigration is an asset to this country. Illegal immigration is a liability.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And it's a very simple equation. And, Americans get it. You look at the polling, they're all for legal immigration with the right protections on it, and they're all against illegal immigration. It's just a really, really big issue for Democrats to try to spin, because there's no good lipstick you can put on this story. But with that many, a number of people come across. Of that 300 plus people that were there, we know at least 100 were let into the country despite the terror flags. Does that concern you? Because that's a lot of people for the FBI to have to watch day in and day out.
Absolutely. And why? I mean, when you catch them, why would you let them go?
It's a head scratcher, right?
Go? I mean, this defies logic. No other country would do that. No other administration would do that, to allow somebody on the terrorist watch list to be apprehended and then to turn around and be set free into the United States of America. They're not coming here to help us. They're coming here to hurt us. And so, I mean, they pull the race card on this and say, well, if you're not for illegal immigration, then that means you hate these people. It's not that I hate those people. I love my country. Now, if they're on the terrorist watch list and they're a terrorist, you're absolutely right. I hate them. But letting them go into the United States of America, that just defies logic. And 31,000 Chinese nationals. I mean, when someone comes into this country illegally, they can't legally work, and yet they continue to receive taxpayer benefits. And so, I mean, if they come here legally, then they can work and they pay taxes in this country. And yes, they receive taxpayer benefits, but at least they're contributing to our economy.
Right. That's right. Yeah, at least there's some provable benefit and some connection to the country too. They're invested in it in some way by putting tax dollars back into society. As you look out over the next few weeks, there are two global crises. There's the Israel-Hamas conflict brought on by Hamas's horrific atrocities of October 7th, and then Russia-Ukraine brought on by Russia's aggression and crossing the border. Both of those seem to be at different points, different maybe forks in the road. Could you just walk us through how you see both conflicts playing out over the next few weeks? I think a lot of people were surprised by Ukraine's recent success.
Yeah, so if Ukraine is going to win, there are a couple of things that have had to happen. One is the Ukrainians have got to be able to play offense. The Biden administration has not allowed them to play offense. They've only allowed them to play defense. So now the Ukrainians are playing offense, and you have to punch back. And I think that's going to help hopefully bring a resolution to the conflict. The other thing that has got to happen is you still have got to enforce the sanctions. And the Biden administration has refused to enforce the sanctions India's been buying billions of dollars worth of oil from Russia. That has given Vladimir Putin the billions of dollars that he's needed to fund his war machine. And to Putin's credit, he's taken that money and he's rebuilt his military-industrial complex, and he's reconstituted his military at a pace that we did not think he could. But again, a lot of our assumptions were based on what would happen to the Russian economy, which is actually growing. And again, that is because the Biden administration has refused to enforce the sanctions. And there is some risk, in fact, I'd say there's some likelihood that unless we could increase production inside the United States to offset taking the Russian oil off the market, which again, I do think we could do, then you would see the price of a gallon of gas go up. And certainly they don't want to do anything to hinder their election. And that's one of their calculations. Their political calculation is if the price of a gallon of gas goes up, then, you know, they're less likely to win the election, which is probably true. But they did this. They did this. I mean, gas was half what it is right now when Donald Trump was president. And if he becomes the president again, I think the way he will get control over inflation immediately will be to sign the executive orders that reduce the cost of energy inside the United States of America.
Yeah, and that's something that Americans would welcome if they could just get some relief at the pumps to go with it. Yeah,
what's wrong with a little extra money in your pocket at the end of the month?
Yeah.
It's been a long time since Americans had that.
It used to be a popular idea, but Democrats have made it impossible to even dream about. It's been such a rough 4 years. You have a very important piece of legislation, and I don't think a lot of Americans understood that we were creating penalties for some of our greatest heroes, Purple Heart winners. Tell us a little bit about the legislation and what injustice it fixes. Yeah,
and let me say this, John, I didn't even realize this was an issue until I was taking a young man hunting. He stepped on a pressure plate. He was a young Marine when this happened. It lost both legs. And so I was taking this guy deer hunting, and his comment was, I work at O'Reilly Auto Parts, but I have to be very careful because if I make more than $1,100 or $1,200 a month, then I lose 100% of my Social Security benefits. And so if he makes more than that certain dollar, then he actually has less money for his family at the end of the month than if he doesn't go back to work. So when we talk about veteran suicide, I'm a firm believer that the best thing that we can do is to get people back into the workforce where they are communicating with people on a daily basis and having that human interaction. It's good for people. And so I wrote a piece of legislation. It basically raises to $2,400 a month instead of it's up to $1,470 now because of inflation, how much they can make without losing their Social Security benefits. So let them make more money without losing their Social Security benefits, and then have an offset so that, you know, no matter how much they make at work, they don't have that cliff where they lose 100% of their Social Security benefits and their family has less at the end of the month if they make more at work. We need to do this, I think, with other programs as well, John, but I specifically limited it to Purple Heart. So these are combat wounded individuals, total and permanent. So it's a small group. It's a small group that's paid a big price for our country. And then if we can make it work there, then hopefully we can make it work in other places as well. We talk about this on the other side of the equation with SNAP benefits. You know, again, if someone makes one extra dollar, should they lose $100 worth of SNAP benefits? And we need to get to some type of residual with all of these things where people are always better off the more they work. But with regard to this piece of legislation, I think it has the ability to impact veteran suicide because again, I think they're better off if they're back at work. They're having that interaction with people on a daily basis, and they shouldn't be penalized if they go to work. And unfortunately, they are. It's part of the Social Security law. It makes it harder to fix because it is in the Social Security law. But we're going to continue to work at this. And we want our veterans, especially those, you know, Purple Heart, total and permanent, to be able to go back to work and not lose their Social Security benefits if they do.
Yeah, it's so common sense, and yet sometimes the bureaucracy resists common sense. That's why what you're doing is so important. Last question for you. We have seen the significant protests that are all over this country on college campuses, which are starting back up at the DNC right now in Chicago. pro-Hamas, pro-Palestine, anti-Israel, anti-American protests. There's been a notable change in the ODNI's assessment. For a long time, the Biden administration and the intel community told us maybe there's a chance to get a deal with Iran. But in recent weeks, we've heard that they were trying to carry out an assassination against several people, including President Trump, that they may be fomenting some of these protests. That's one of the official assessments of DNI. And that, of course, the funding instability across the world, and we're involved in a hack, potentially, of the presidential campaigns. Do you think now that as the end of the Biden era comes closer, that the intelligence community is giving us a more honest assessment of what was always obvious, which is that Iran wasn't going to be a good actor?
Yeah, I have never understood why the Biden administration or the Obama administration or Kamala Harris felt like you can negotiate with terrorists. It just doesn't make any sense to me that they think that they can negotiate with these terrorists. It is the picture of arrogance from them to think that they can negotiate with terrorists and come out on the winning end of any negotiations. It's just not going to happen. The terrorists only understand one thing, and that's strength. That's it. And so when we talk about Israel right now, Hamas could release the hostages anytime they want to. When Benjamin Netanyahu was in Washington, D.C., Kamala Harris comes out and says, I told Benjamin Netanyahu to get the deal done now. Well, Hamas is holding the hostages.
Yes. Got the wrong guy in the crosshairs, perhaps.
Yeah. You got the wrong, you're blaming the wrong person for not having a deal, but they're beholden to, that faction of their party that conducts themselves that way. You see it on the campuses. You saw where, the president of some of the supposed most elite schools in the United States couldn't even call out for what it is, from the river to the sea. There's no way to contextualize that it does not include the elimination of Israel and the Jewish people. They've embedded themselves in these campuses, and they've embedded themselves in the Democratic Party. And I think, if you look at what's happening with the Democratic Convention this week, I think America's going to be reminded of, the danger of trying to negotiate with people like that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly it. And a lot of people in the last couple of weeks said the lack of response from the Biden-Harris administration, whether it's the attacks on our troops in Iraq and Syria, it's taken away any deterrence. Do you share those sentiments?
Absolutely. And when, it's the uncommitted number at the ballot box that scares, the Harris administration and the Democratic Party. And they should have never pretended that they could negotiate with terrorists. And now they've brought this into our country. And, when you see people taking down the American flag and burning the American flag and putting up the Palestinian flag and vandalizing property inside Washington, D.C., the question is, what's going to happen to them? Well, most of these liberal Democratic prosecutors won't touch them. They're not going to touch them. And, and so it's not going to stop. The only way to stop it is to put someone who's strong in the White House who's not going to put up with it.
Yeah, that is what's needed. There's no doubt about it. Congressman, we always get not only straight talk from you, but a lot of common sense. I think people will get frustrated in Washington. They say, where's all the common sense? Well, every time we talk to you, we get a good, healthy dose of it. Great to have you on the show today. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, John. Thank you.